I am Kendra, 33 years old, and the founder of a corporate restructuring firm in Chicago. 10 years ago, I sat in a cramped apartment staring at a caterer contract I had drained my savings to pay for. I knew my sister would fabricate a crisis to make my parents cancel my 23rd birthday dinner. My mother called and delivered the blow without a hint of remorse, saying they were canceling my birthday because my sister needed them. My father then took the phone and told me I was the strong one and that I should not embarrass the family. It had become a toxic pattern I could no longer ignore. So when they abandoned me for her yet again, I left and never came back. Today they are begging for my help. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your peace and build your own empire. Growing up in a polished middle-class neighborhood in Atlanta, our household was a theater of expectations. My parents, Reginald and Vivian, were obsessed with presenting an image of flawless success to the outside world. My older sister, Chantel, was the lead actress in their production. She was the golden child who never had to lift a finger, the one whose mediocre achievements were celebrated with lavish parties and endless praise. I was the understudy expected to perform perfectly, but never meant to take a bow. By the time I turned 23, I was exhausted from playing a supporting role in my own life. I was working 60 hours a week at a junior financial firm, scraping together every dime I had to build a future they never seemed interested in. For my 23rd birthday, I decided I was going to celebrate myself properly. I had spent 4 months meticulously planning a private dinner at an upscale downtown restaurant. I paid the non-refundable deposit for a private dining room. I curated a menu that included butter-poached lobster and dry-aged steaks. I even bought a stunning emerald green dress that made me feel like the powerful woman I was working so hard to become. I wanted just one night where I was the center of attention, where my family would sit around a table and acknowledge the daughter who paid her own bills and handled her own problems. The invitations had been sent weeks in advance. Both my parents had confirmed they would be there. But deep down in the pit of my stomach, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety. Chantel had recently gotten engaged to Connor, a wealthy white man from a prominent family with old money ties. Ever since Connor entered the picture, my parents had kicked their obsession with appearances into overdrive. They were desperate to prove that our family belonged in the same social stratosphere as his. Chantel, of course, milked this dynamic for all it was worth, playing the overwhelmed bride-to-be while treating our parents like her personal assistants. 2 days before my dinner, the phone rang. I was standing in my small kitchen, steaming my green dress and going over the final seating chart. When I saw my mother's name on the caller ID, the knot in my stomach tightened. I picked up the phone, expecting her to ask what time they needed to arrive at the restaurant. "Kendra, we have a situation," Vivian said. There was no hello. There was no warmth. Her tone was brisk and entirely focused on business. "What kind of situation, Mom?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Connor's parents decided to fly in early from Boston. They are arriving tomorrow evening instead of next week. Chantel is an absolute wreck. Her house is a mess and she is panicking about hosting them. Your father and I are heading over there right now to deep clean her place and start prepping a welcome dinner. You need to call your restaurant and cancel your birthday thing. We cannot make it." I stood frozen, holding the steaming wand in the air. The casual cruelty of her demand washed over me. She did not ask if we could reschedule. She did not offer an apology. She simply ordered me to dismantle 4 months of planning and throw away my hard-earned money because Chantel could not be bothered to hire a cleaning service. "Cancel it," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "Mom, I paid a non-refundable deposit. I have already guaranteed the head count for the caterer. This is my 23rd birthday and you RSVP'd a month ago." "Do not use that tone with me," Kendra, Vivian snapped. Her stress was palpable, but it was entirely reserved for her golden child. "This is not about a birthday dinner. This is about your sister's future. Do you understand who Connor's parents are? We cannot have them walking into Chantel's house seeing dust on the baseboards or eating takeout. We have to represent our family properly. We have to show them that Chantel comes from a household of excellence. So to prove black excellence to Connor's white parents, you are going to abandon your own daughter's birthday to go scrub baseboards, I asked. The sheer absurdity of the situation fueled the rising anger in my chest. Chantel does not work, Mom. She has been sitting at home for 3 weeks planning her wedding. Why is her dirty house your emergency? Because she is overwhelmed, Vivian shot back. You have always been so selfish, Kendra. You only think about what you want. Your sister is marrying into a very important family. This merger is critical for all of us. You can have a piece of cake any day of the week. Right now, Chantel needs her family. I am your family too, I said, fighting the urge to raise my voice. I am your daughter. I just want one night where I am the priority. Just one. There was a brief, muffled sound on the other end of the line. I could hear my mother sighing heavily, clearly exasperated, that I was not immediately submitting to her demands. Then the phone shuffled, and a different voice came on the line. It was my father, Reginald. His deep, authoritative voice had always been the ultimate gavel in our household. Kendra, stop giving your mother a hard time, Reginald commanded. His tone was not angry, but it was coated in that heavy, patronizing disappointment he always used to keep me in line. Dad, I am not giving her a hard time. I am asking you both to show up for the dinner you promised to attend. I paid for this myself. Money is not the issue here, Reginald said, brushing past my financial sacrifice as if it meant nothing. It is about maturity. You are the strong one, Kendra. You have always been independent. You do not need us to hold your hand to cut a cake. Chantel is different. She needs the support right now. Connor's family is very influential, and we need to make sure this union goes smoothly. Do not embarrass us by acting like a spoiled child. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. The strength they always praised me for was never a compliment. It was a convenient excuse. They labeled me the strong one so they could justify abandoning me. They weaponized my independence to absolve themselves of their parental duties. Every time I handled a problem on my own, they took it as permission to give all their emotional and financial resources to Chantel. I am not acting spoiled, I said, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. I am asking for the bare minimum of respect. We will take you out to lunch next month, Reginald offered, tossing me a verbal scrap. Right now we are going to Chantel's house. Cancel the restaurant, Kendra. Be the bigger person. He hung up. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone, staring at the black screen. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I looked at the beautiful emerald green dress hanging on the closet door. I looked at the seating chart I had so carefully drawn out. And then something inside me simply snapped. There were no tears. I had shed all my tears for this family during my teenage years. What replaced the sorrow was a cold, calculating clarity. They had made their choice. They had looked at the 2 daughters they raised and decided that scrubbing floors for a wealthy white man's approval was more valuable than celebrating my existence. They chose the illusion of prestige over actual flesh and blood. I walked over to the closet and pulled the green dress off the hanger. I did not call the restaurant. I did not cancel the caterer. I was not going to let their absence dictate my reality anymore. I realized in that exact moment that arguing with them was a waste of breath. Demanding love from people who view you as an inconvenience is a losing battle. If I stayed in this dynamic, I would spend the rest of my life begging for crumbs from their table while they served a feast to Chantel. I picked up my car keys from the counter. I was not going to cry and I was not going to stay home. I was going to drive to Chantel's house. I was not going to beg them to come to my dinner. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to witness the physical manifestation of their betrayal to permanently kill any lingering hope I had left for them. I needed to see exactly what I was walking away from. I threw my car into drive and gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned ashen. The drive from my cramped part of the city to Chantel's sprawling suburban neighborhood took 45 minutes, but my mind raced faster than the highway traffic. I did not shed a single tear. Crying was a luxury for people who had a safety net to catch them when they fell. I had a bank account hovering near zero and a family that treated my existence like a scheduling conflict. Chantel lived in an upscale gated community, a pristine neighborhood filled with manicured lawns and imported luxury cars. My beat-up sedan sputtered as I passed the security checkpoint. The guard waved me through, only because he recognized my license plate from the countless times my mother had sent me over here to deliver groceries or drop off dry cleaning for my sister. Even the security staff knew my role in this family. I was the delivery girl. I parked 2 houses down from Chantel's massive modern colonial. The driveway was already packed with high-end vehicles, including a sleek silver Mercedes that undoubtedly belonged to Connor's parents. I stepped out into the crisp evening air. The neighborhood was dead silent, the kind of quiet that only expensive real estate can buy. I walked up the meticulously paved driveway, my heels clicking softly against the stone. I intended to march right up to that custom mahogany front door and pound on it until someone answered. I was ready to demand that my parents look me in the eye and explain why my 23rd birthday was worth less than a dirty baseboard. But I never made it to the door. Chantel's house featured massive floor-to-ceiling bay windows across the front, offering an unobstructed view straight into her formal dining room and open-concept kitchen. The interior was lit up like a movie set, and the performance I witnessed through that glass stopped me dead in my tracks. There was Chantel draped in a designer silk blouse holding a crystal wine glass. She was leaning against the marble kitchen island, laughing brightly at something Connor was saying. Connor stood beside her, exuding the effortless entitlement of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. Across the room, sitting on plush velvet dining chairs, were Connor's parents. They looked exactly as you would expect older, wealthy, white, conservative, and utterly comfortable being catered to. And they were absolutely being catered to. My breath hitched as I spotted my mother. Vivian was wearing a catering apron over her nice clothes. The woman who had obsessed over her image, who spent hours at the salon to maintain her flawless appearance, was currently carrying a heavy silver tray of appetizers across Chantel's living room. She leaned down, offering a delicate pastry to Connor's mother with a subservient, strained smile that made my stomach turn. Then I saw my father. Reginald, the man who constantly lectured me about dignity and power. The man who demanded respect from everyone he met was standing near the kitchen sink polishing wine glasses with a microfiber cloth. He handed a spotless glass to Connor, who took it without even looking at my father, without a single word of thanks. I stood frozen on the lawn, hidden by the darkness of the front yard. The sheer humiliation of the scene paralyzed me. My parents were not there dealing with a crisis. There was no emergency. They had canceled my birthday dinner the one night I asked them to celebrate my existence so they could play the role of unpaid domestic help for my sister's future in-laws. They were serving them. They were literally waiting hand and foot on Connor's family just to ensure Chantel secured her spot in their wealthy white lineage. They had traded my dignity for proximity to power. I watched my mother rush back into the kitchen to check on something in the oven, wiping sweat from her forehead. Chantel did not move to help her. My sister simply took another sip of her wine and gestured vaguely toward the dining room, directing our mother to fetch more napkins. Vivian nodded eagerly, rushing to comply. A cold, hard realization washed over me. This was not just about a canceled dinner. This was the blueprint of our entire family dynamic, laid bare behind expensive glass. Chantel was the prize. Connor was the ultimate trophy. And I was completely disposable. If I knocked on that door, I would not get an apology. I would get scolded for interrupting the performance. Reginald would drag me onto the porch and hiss at me for ruining the image they were working so desperately to project. Vivian would look at me with resentment for making her feel guilty. They did not want me there. They had never wanted me there, unless I was holding a tray right alongside them serving Chantel's ambition. I did not knock. I did not scream. I did not throw a rock through that pristine bay window, even though my hands twitched with the urge to destroy the perfect illusion. The anger that had fueled my drive over here evaporated entirely. It was replaced by a sudden chilling emptiness. You cannot fight for a place at a table where no chair was ever set for you. I turned on my heel. I walked back down the quiet driveway, the sound of my footsteps swallowed by the heavy suburban night. I got back into my sputtering car, put the key in the ignition, and drove away from the gated community. I did not look in the rearview mirror. The drive back to my tiny apartment was a blur of pure calculated adrenaline. The girl who had spent months agonizing over a seating chart and dreaming of her parents' validation died somewhere on that highway. The woman who took the wheel was entirely different. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the space felt incredibly small. The emerald green dress still hung on the closet door, a vibrant reminder of a celebration that was never going to happen. I walked straight past it. I pulled two large suitcases from under my bed and opened them on the floor. I packed with ruthless efficiency. I did not take souvenirs. I did not take photo albums filled with pictures of a family that only smiled for the camera. I packed business suits, sensible shoes, my laptop, and every piece of financial documentation I owned. I grabbed my savings jar, emptying the meager amount of cash I had managed to scrape together into my purse. I moved through the apartment like a machine, stripping away any trace of the life I had tried to build in this city. When I reached the kitchen, I saw the caterer contract sitting on the counter. I picked it up, ripped it precisely down the middle, and dropped it into the trash can. I zipped the suitcases shut. It was 11:30 at night. In 30 minutes, it would officially be my 23rd birthday. I dragged my bags to the front door. Before I walked out, I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. I opened my contacts. I deleted my mother's number. I deleted my father's number. I deleted Chantel's number. I turned off the location tracking services and powered the device down completely. I did not leave a dramatic note. I did not send a text message demanding closure. Closure is something you give yourself when you realize the people who hurt you enjoy watching you bleed. I locked the apartment door, leaving the keys on the kitchen counter for the landlord. I loaded my two suitcases into the trunk of my car. The engine protested as I turned the ignition, but it held steady. I pulled out onto the main road, heading toward the interstate. I was leaving the city. I was leaving the state. I was leaving the shadow of a family that demanded my strength only to build up my sister's weakness. As the clock on my dashboard struck midnight, marking the exact beginning of my 23rd year, the city lights began to fade behind me. The open highway stretched out into the dark. I made a vow to myself, gripping the steering wheel as the miles rolled by. I would never be their second choice again. I would never wait for an invitation to a table I did not own. I was going to build my own table. I was going to construct an empire so massive and so impenetrable that the next time they saw me, they would have to look up, and they would definitely see me again, but not as a daughter seeking approval. The next time our paths crossed, I would be the one holding the gavel. The miles turned into states, and the states turned into years. 10 years passed. A decade of relentless grinding, of sleeping under office desks, of tearing apart balance sheets, and rebuilding broken corporate structures. I traded the desperate need for parental love for the cold, hard currency of absolute power. I moved to Chicago and clawed my way to the top of the corporate restructuring food chain. I became the person billionaire boards called when their companies were bleeding out. I fixed their messes, or I carved up their assets and sold them for scrap. I am 33 now. My office sits on the top floor of a high-rise in the Loop with floor-to-ceiling windows that look nothing like the ones at Chantel's house. My windows look down on the world. My phone screen lights up on my massive glass desk. It is a text from a number I never bothered to save but know by heart. My mother sending her annual generic holiday message, pretending the silence between us is just a phase. I swipe the notification away without opening it. I do not have time for ghosts. I have empires to dismantle. My office doors swing open. Jamal, my lead investigator and the sharpest mind in my firm, walks in. He does not knock because he knows I value efficiency over ceremony. Jamal drops a thick, heavily redacted red folder right in the center of my desk. He looks at me with an expression I rarely see on his face, a mix of intense caution and absolute anticipation. "We have a situation," he says, his voice tight. "A distressed tech logistics firm out of Atlanta. They are drowning in hidden debt and begging for an emergency under-the-radar buyout to avoid a scandalous bankruptcy. They want a silent investor to bail them out before the board finds out the CEO has been cooking the books." I lean back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers. I deal with failing companies every day. Why the red folder, Jamal? He taps the cover. Because you are going to want to see who is begging for the bailout. I pull the folder toward me. I flip open the heavy cardstock cover. The executive summary page stares back at me. I do not look at the financial figures first. I look at the corporate headshots printed at the top of the page. The CEO smiling with that same effortless, arrogant entitlement I remember from 10 years ago is Connor. And listed right below him, bearing the title of Vice President of Public Relations, is my sister, Chantel. A slow, cold smile spreads across my face, the kind of smile that makes board members sweat. They are bankrupt, and they are looking for a savior. I close the folder. The universe has a brilliant sense of humor. I spent 10 years building a guillotine, and my family just placed their heads right on the block. 10 years is exactly 3,650 days. I spent every single one of them building an empire out of other people's failures. My office on the 45th floor of a Chicago high-rise is a testament to what happens when you stop waiting for a seat at the table and decide to buy the entire building instead. I am the founder and lead executive of an elite corporate restructuring firm. I do not do friendly mergers. I dismantle failing companies, tear out their toxic rot, and force them into profitability, or I sell them for scrap. My reputation is ruthless and it is entirely earned. I am standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the freezing gray waters of Lake Michigan when my phone screen lights up on my glass desk. A single text message from a number I never bothered to save, but my memory refuses to delete. It is Vivian, my mother. The message reads, "Thinking of you during this holiday season. Hope you are well." I do not sigh. I do not feel that old familiar sting of rejection in my chest. The girl who would have desperately analyzed that text for a hidden ounce of maternal love died a decade ago on a dark suburban street in Atlanta. I pick up the phone, swipe the notification into the digital trash, and place the device face down. I do not have time for ghosts. The heavy oak doors of my office swing open. Jamal, my lead investigator and right-hand man, strides into the room. Jamal is a brilliant former forensic accountant who can spot a forged tax return from 3 blocks away. He is fiercely loyal, fiercely protective of our firm, and he never knocks. He drops a thick crimson folder directly into the center of my desk. The loud slap of the heavy cardstock echoes in the quiet room. In my firm, a red folder means only one thing. A company is actively bleeding to death. "We have a massive situation," Jamal says, his voice tight with adrenaline. "This is a distressed tech logistics firm out of Atlanta. They expanded way too fast, burned through their initial venture capital, and are now drowning in toxic debt. They are begging for an emergency under-the-radar buyout. They want a silent investor to bail them out before the board of directors realizes the executive team has been cooking the books. They are trying to avoid a public bankruptcy that would send federal regulators swarming over their ledgers." I walk slowly back to my leather chair and sit down. I deal with failing businesses and desperate executives every single day. "Why the red folder, Jamal?" I ask, keeping my eyes locked on his. He taps the cover of the dossier with his index finger. "Because you are going to want to see exactly who is begging for the bailout." I pull the folder toward me. I flip past the non-disclosure agreements, the panicked cover letters, and the desperate financial projections. I turn directly to the executive summary. 2 glossy corporate headshots stare back at me from the top of the page. The chief executive officer, sporting a custom-tailored suit and the exact same arrogant, entitled smirk I left behind a decade ago, is Connor. And listed right beneath him, bearing the title of Vice President of Public Relations, is my older sister, Chantel. I do not gasp. I do not flinch. A slow, razor-sharp smile pulls at the corners of my mouth. I lean forward, bracing my elbows on the desk. The universe has a brilliant sense of humor. I spent 10 years building a guillotine, and my family just placed their heads right on the block. "Let us see how deep the rot goes," I say, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I spend the next 20 minutes pulling apart their financial statements line by line. It is not just a struggling company. It is a corporate crime scene. Connor has not just been managing the business poorly, he has been actively committing fraud. I trace the numbers through a web of clever misdirections that would have fooled a lazy auditor, but they cannot fool me. There is $15 million in hidden debt disguised under fake shell vendors and grossly inflated marketing budgets. I follow the trail of the missing money directly to Chantel. The exorbitant public relations budget she supposedly manages is nothing but a corporate slush fund. Connor has been embezzling from his own investors to maintain my sister's lavish country club lifestyle. He has been siphoning corporate funds to pay for her designer wardrobe, her luxury cars, and the flawless image of success my parents so desperately worship. Connor used his white male corporate privilege to secure millions in funding because investors blindly trusted his pedigree, and he immediately used that money to fund his wife's vanity. Jamal stands across the desk watching my eyes scan the documents. "This asset is completely toxic," Jamal warns. "The liability is massive. My recommendation is that we pass on this immediately. We let them file for bankruptcy and we watch them burn on the evening news. It is not worth our capital, Kendra." I close the folder and rest my hands flat on top of it. I look up at Jamal and my smile widens. "We are not passing," I tell him. "I want you to execute an aggressive debt purchase right now. Set up a blind proxy limited liability company. Use our secondary holding accounts so our name is nowhere on the initial paperwork. I want to buy every single cent of their distressed debt, and I want it done before the banks close today." Jamal stares at me for a fraction of a second. He is a smart man. He sees the names on the file and he sees the cold calculation in my eyes. He does not ask questions. He gives a sharp nod, scoops up the folder, and walks out of the office to make the calls. For the rest of the afternoon, the adrenaline thrums through my veins. The girl who was treated like an unwanted burden is gone. In her place is an apex predator waiting for the trap to spring. I watch the clock on the wall tick forward. At 3 o'clock, the wire transfers hit the respective accounts. At 4:30, the digital contracts are securely routed through our blind proxy. By 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, the ink is completely dry. Connor and Chantel are sitting down in their massive Atlanta mansion, pouring a glass of expensive wine, celebrating their salvation. They think they have just been rescued by a faceless, gullible venture capital firm in the Midwest. They think they got away with $15 million of corporate fraud. They have absolutely no idea that they just sold their financial souls to the little sister they threw away. I turn my chair back toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights of Chicago begin to spark to life against the darkening sky. I am now legally my brother-in-law's largest creditor. I own the roof over their heads, the cars in their driveway, and the very ground they walk on. I hold their entire future in the palm of my hand, and I am fully prepared to crush it. I do not hand the folder back to Jamal. I spread the financial statements across the cold glass of my desk. The deeper I dig into the numbers, the more the pristine image of my sister's perfect marriage crumbles into ash. Connor is not just an incompetent chief executive officer. He is a textbook corporate criminal. I trace a web of fraudulent wire transfers and shell companies that would make a rookie auditor dizzy, but I am not a rookie. There is $15 million in hidden unsecured debt disguised as offshore research and development. He created phantom logistics vendors to drain capital directly from the company accounts. I pull up the banking routing numbers from the dossier and cross-reference them with public property and business registries. The phantom vendors share addresses with luxury car dealerships, high-end interior designers, and the most exclusive, predominantly white country club in Atlanta. Connor has been bleeding his own investors dry to fund Chantel's insatiable appetite for status. My parents sacrificed my dignity to secure my sister a spot in a counterfeit kingdom. They scrubbed baseboards and bowed their heads for a man who is secretly drowning in fraud. Jamal stands across from me, tapping his pen against his clipboard. His brow is furrowed as he watches my eyes dart across the balance sheets. He points to the bottom line detailing the massive liabilities waiting to explode. "This asset is completely toxic," Jamal warns, his voice sharp and urgent. The liability is massive, Kendra. The Securities and Exchange Commission is going to catch wind of this within the quarter. The moment the board of directors demands a forensic audit, Connor is going straight to federal prison. My recommendation is that we pass on this immediately. We dump this file in the shredder, we let them file for bankruptcy, and we watch them burn on the evening news. It is not worth our capital. I look at Jamal and slide the heavily redacted ledger back toward him. A slow, razor-sharp smile pulls at the corners of my mouth. I tell him we are not passing on this. I tell him we are going to swallow their debt whole. Jamal stares at me, his professional composure breaking for a fraction of a second. Buying their equity is corporate suicide, he argues. You are taking on $15 million of fraudulent baggage. I correct him instantly. We are not buying their equity, Jamal. We are buying their debt. We are going to become their bank. I instruct Jamal to activate a blind proxy limited liability company, a ghost entity registered through Delaware, completely untraceable back to our primary firm in Chicago. We will purchase the $15 million of unsecured debt at a premium from their current panicked lenders who are desperate to offload the risk. Connor is currently searching for a silent partner to consolidate his financial mess before his board of directors realizes the company accounts are hollow. We will be that silent partner. We will offer a lifeline that is actually a noose. The office shifts into absolute overdrive. Jamal does not ask any more questions. He knows that tone in my voice. He scoops up the folder and begins barking orders to our legal team. They draft the acquisition paperwork under the proxy name bearing aggressive acceleration clauses deep within the addendums. I demand stipulations that give the primary creditor, meaning me, the right to demand immediate repayment in full if any financial discrepancies are discovered post-signing. Connor has built a house of cards, and I am installing the win machine. I watch the clock on my wall tick past 3 in the afternoon. The adrenaline thrums through my veins. The girl who was treated like an unwanted burden a decade ago is completely gone. In her place is an apex predator waiting for the trap to spring. I can picture Connor sitting in his sprawling Atlanta mansion right now, sweating through his custom-tailored suit, praying for a miracle. He thinks his corporate privilege and polished vocabulary will save him one more time. He assumes the faceless investment group taking over his debt is just another board of gullible executives he can charm and manipulate at the next shareholder meeting. He thinks he is playing a game of golf, but he has just walked onto a battlefield. At 4:30, the wire transfers clear our offshore accounts. The digital contracts hit Connor's inbox. I imagine him and Chantel staring at the screen, desperate for the influx of cash that will keep the illusion of their generational wealth alive for another month. They sign the documents immediately. They do not consult a secondary forensic lawyer. They do not read the fine print. They are too arrogant and too desperate to realize they just signed away their leverage. By 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, the digital ink dries. The confirmation notifications light up my secure monitor in rapid succession. The transaction is complete and legally binding. I lean back in my leather chair and look out over the freezing gray waters of Lake Michigan. I am now legally the largest creditor my brother-in-law has. I own the mortgage on his corporate survival, and I hold the absolute leash to my sister's fraudulent lifestyle. The digital ink on the proxy acquisition dried on Friday evening. By Monday morning, I instructed Jamal to send the official summons. We operated under a ghost entity called Vertex Capital Solutions. The email was polite, but carried the undeniable weight of an absolute directive. We required the chief executive officer and the vice president of public relations to appear in person at our Chicago headquarters to finalize the terms of the debt consolidation. Connor replied within 12 minutes. His response was a masterpiece of corporate desperation, masked as casual arrogance. He tried to dictate the schedule, suggesting a Thursday afternoon meeting because he claimed he had a prior engagement on the golf course with local politicians in Atlanta. I read his email and smiled. I told Jamal to reject his timeline completely. We set the meeting for exactly 8 in the morning on Wednesday. I wanted them scrambling. I wanted Connor forced to book a last-minute flight on Tuesday night. I wanted him to understand instantly that he possessed absolutely zero leverage in this negotiation. When you owe a shadow firm $15 million, you do not get to prioritize your golf swing. Connor confirmed the Wednesday morning slot within 2 minutes of our rejection. The trap was set, and the prey was voluntarily booking a first-class ticket right into the jaws of it. Wednesday morning arrived with a biting chill rolling off Lake Michigan. I stepped into my penthouse boardroom 2 hours before they were scheduled to arrive. This room was designed to intimidate. It lacked the warm mahogany and plush carpets my father Reginald favored in his home office. My boardroom was all sharp angles, cold-polished concrete, and a massive table cut from a single slab of black marble. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a vertigo-inducing view of the Chicago skyline. There was nowhere to hide in this room. You were either the person looking down at the city, or you were the person being thrown off the edge. I chose my wardrobe with the same precision I used to dismantle corporate ledgers. I wore a tailored slate gray suit that cost more than the catering bill for my 23rd birthday. My hair was pulled back into a flawless, sleek style, leaving my face completely unobstructed. I wore no jewelry except a simple watch. I did not need diamonds to project wealth. My power was the building they were walking into. At exactly 7:30, Jamal walked into the boardroom. He carried a single leather binder containing the printed evidence of Connor's offshore embezzlement and Chantel's fraudulent vendor accounts. They just checked in with the lobby security desk. Jamal said, his tone strictly professional. "Make them wait," I instructed. "Do not bring them up immediately. Leave them in the downstairs reception area for exactly 22 minutes. Offer them water but no coffee. Let them sit there and stare at the marble walls. I want Connor's anxiety to peak before he even steps onto the elevator." Jamal nodded and left the room. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and clasped my hands behind my back. I looked out over the sprawling grid of the city below. For 10 years, I had visualized this exact scenario. I had imagined what it would feel like to finally hold the absolute upper hand against the people who treated me like a disposable accessory in their pursuit of status. But standing here now, I did not feel the fiery rage of a rejected 23-year-old girl. I felt nothing but cold, calculated anticipation. The emotional wounds they inflicted had scarred over into armor. At 7:52, the private elevator chimed at the end of the hall. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom clicked open. I kept my back turned, facing the glass, keeping my hands perfectly still. Connor's voice entered the room before he did. He was speaking loudly, projecting that booming manufactured confidence taught in elite business schools to mask incompetence. He was trying to establish dominance over Jamal the moment he stepped off the elevator. "Quite a view you have up here," Connor was saying. "I play a round of golf with a developer in Atlanta who tried to build something similar, but the zoning laws were a nightmare. You know how it is. Tell the managing partner I am looking forward to getting this paperwork wrapped up quickly. My wife and I have reservations at a nice steakhouse downtown for lunch." Connor was doing exactly what I anticipated. He was attempting to build a boys' club rapport with Jamal. He assumed he was walking into a room to meet a fellow wealthy white executive who would slap him on the back, share a laugh about the golf course, and politely ignore the fact that his company was $15 million in the red. He thought his pedigree and his tailored suit would shield him from consequence. Chantel spoke next. Her voice was sharp and laced with that familiar irritated entitlement. "Connor, I told you the wind in this city is ridiculous," she complained, her heels clicking loudly against the polished concrete floor. "It completely ruined my blowout on the walk from the car. I hope this anonymous savior of yours has decent coffee at least. I am exhausted from that dreadful flight." My sister was still playing the role of the put-upon-society wife, expecting the world to bend to her minor inconveniences. She had no idea that her lifestyle was funded by stolen money, and she had no idea who owned the bank. "Please take a seat," Jamal said, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of emotion. "The managing director is ready for you." I heard the scraping of leather chairs being pulled back from the marble table. I heard the rustle of Connor setting his expensive briefcase down on the surface. He was probably arranging his useless pitch deck, preparing to sell a fictional version of his company to a man who did not exist. "Is he on a call?" Connor asked, sounding slightly annoyed that the managing director had not immediately greeted him. I really do not have all morning. We have pressing operational matters to attend to back in Atlanta. The sheer audacity of a man drowning in fraud attempting to rush the person holding his lifeline was staggering. He was so accustomed to my parents catering to his every whim that he expected the entire corporate world to do the same. The managing director is right here, Jamal replied. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I gripped the armrests of my high-backed leather chair. I did not rush. I turned the chair around with smooth glacial precision. The swivel brought me face to face with the two people who had spent the last decade assuming I was a failure, who had simply faded away into obscurity. Connor was frozen halfway through opening his briefcase. His mouth was slightly open. His brain was failing to process the visual information in front of him. He was looking for a septuagenarian billionaire. Instead, he found the black sister-in-law he had actively encouraged my parents to discard. But the true masterpiece of the moment was Chantel, my older sister, the golden child, who had mocked my ambitions and treated me like her personal assistant, was seated directly across the table. Her perfectly manicured hand was resting on the marble surface. As her eyes locked onto mine, the haughty annoyance completely vanished from her face. It was replaced by a cinematic shock so profound it looked as though the oxygen had been physically violently sucked out of her lungs. The color drained entirely from Chantel's face, leaving her makeup looking stark and unnatural against her ashen skin. Her jaw slackened. Her eyes widened in pure, unadulterated terror as the reality of the situation crashed down upon her. She recognized the room. She recognized the authority in Jamal's posture as he stood at attention beside me. She recognized the power radiating from the very chair I sat in. My estranged rebellious scapegoat sister status was gone. I was the financial Grim Reaper holding the leash to her husband's corporate survival. I looked at the woman who had happily allowed my parents to cancel my life to serve her needs. I looked at the man who thought he could steal millions and charm his way out of a prison sentence. They had walked into my fortress completely blind. They had willingly handed over the keys to their entire existence to the one person on earth who owed them absolutely no mercy. The silence in the room stretched out heavy and suffocating. Neither of them could formulate a single word. Their arrogance had evaporated, leaving nothing but raw, naked panic. "Welcome to Chicago," I said, my voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel. "Let us talk about your debt." The echo of my greeting bounces off the cold glass walls of the boardroom. Chantel blinks rapidly, her perfectly manicured hands trembling as she reaches out to grab Connor's arm. Her brain is completely short-circuiting. She has spent a decade actively erasing my existence, treating me like a cautionary tale of rebellion and failure. Now she is desperately trying to rewrite our history in real time to save her own skin. "Oh, Connor, honey," she says, forcing a high-pitched, brittle giggle that shatters the heavy silence. "It is just Kendra. This is just my little sister." She turns her gaze back to me, flashing a manufactured, desperate smile that does not reach her terrified eyes. "Oh my God, Kendra, you nearly gave me a heart attack. You should have told us it was you. We are family, this is perfect. You have to save us. Mom and Dad are going to be so relieved it is just you handling this." I do not smile back. I do not nod. I keep my posture perfectly rigid, leaning back slightly in my leather chair. I let her empty words hang in the freezing air of the room. The sheer audacity of her entitlement is staggering. She spent my entire life acting like my ambition was a disease. She allowed my parents to treat me like hired help on my own 23rd birthday. She stood by a window sipping expensive wine while I was discarded. And now, because her fraudulent kingdom is collapsing, she wants to play the blood card to erase a $15 million deficit. Connor recovers his voice before Chantel can continue her pathetic performance. He straightens his custom silk tie and clears his throat. I watch the precise moment his white male corporate privilege kicks back in to override his panic. He simply cannot compute the dynamic. He cannot accept that a black woman, especially the sister-in-law he used to openly mock at Thanksgiving dinners, is the one holding his absolute leash. He assumes my position is a fluke, an administrative error he can charm his way out of. Connor steps forward, leaning his knuckles heavily on the black marble table to physically loom over me. It is an old intimidation tactic taught in mediocre business seminars, and it is entirely useless here. "Look, Kendra," he says using a placating, condescending tone that makes my blood run cold. "It is cute that you set up this little proxy firm. It really is. But let us talk about how leverage actually works in the real world." We hit a minor liquidity snag, a temporary cash flow hiccup due to market fluctuations and some aggressive expansion models. We just need you to restructure the repayment terms. Extend the runway by 24 months. We will issue your firm some preferred shares, and when the market corrects next quarter, everyone wins. That is business. You help us out and we make you look good. He offers me a tight, patronizing smile, as if he has just done me a massive favor by explaining basic economics. He thinks I'm playing a game. He thinks he can throw a few buzzwords at me and I will blindly sign a contract extension because we share a last name. I let his words fade into the vast silence of the room. Jamal stands completely motionless by the door, his arms crossed, watching the execution unfold. I stand up slowly, smoothing the front of my slate gray suit. I do not raise my voice. I speak with the quiet, crushing authority that Fortune 500 boards pay me millions to deliver. "A minor liquidity snag," I repeat, dissecting his vocabulary with surgical precision. "Is that what we are calling it now?" 10 years ago, my father used to sit at the head of his polished dining table and silence me just so he could listen to you talk about your limitless potential. Reginald told me to take notes. He told me to watch a real businessman operate. So I watched you, Connor. I watched you very closely. I walked slowly around the edge of the massive marble table, the click of my heels striking the floor like a metronome counting down to his destruction. Connor's confident smile begins to waver. "You do not have a cash flow hiccup," I continue, my voice dropping to a glacial chill. "You have a catastrophic systemic failure. You burned through your Series A funding in exactly 9 months. You leveraged your primary logistics contracts to secure a mezzanine loan you knew you could not service. You aggressively depreciated your assets on paper while simultaneously inflating your marketing budget by 300% just to hide the daily bleed from your investors. You do not understand leverage, Connor. You understand theft." Connor's face turns a blotchy dark red. The vein in his neck pulses rapidly. He opens his mouth to argue, to quote some obsolete textbook theory, to tell me I am misunderstanding the corporate tax code. He points a finger at me, ready to unleash a tirade about how I do not comprehend the nuances of tech logistics. "Sit down," I command. It is not a request. It is an executive order delivered with such absolute dominating force that his knees physically buckle. The authority in my voice leaves no room for debate. He drops heavily into the leather chair, his chest heaving as he stares up at me in stunned silence. He has never been spoken to like that in his entire life. Chantel gasps, clutching her designer handbag to her chest. "Kendra, you cannot speak to him like that. He is your brother-in-law. We came here for financial help, not a lecture from a dropout who ran away from her family." I stop pacing. I stand directly at the head of the table, towering over both of them. The air in the room is suffocatingly dense. I look at my sister, taking in her trembling hands, her pale face, her desperate clinging to a social hierarchy that no longer exists. She is trying to use a weapon that ran out of ammunition a decade ago. "There is no Kendra in this room," I state, my voice echoing off the glass. "There are no brothers or sisters. There is no family. There is only the primary creditor and the defaulting debtors. From this moment forward, you will address me as Ms. Williams, and I will address you as Mr. and Mrs. Sterling." Chantel opens her mouth to protest, but no sound comes out. The reality of their total powerlessness finally crashes down on her shoulders. They have no money. They have no leverage. They have no escape. I pick up the heavy leather-bound ledger Jamal prepared for me. I hold it for a fraction of a second, feeling the weight of their ruined empire in my hands. I slide the ledger across the smooth black marble. It glides perfectly, stopping exactly an inch from Connor's trembling fingertips. "Now, Mr. Sterling," I say, tapping the heavy cover of the dossier once with my index finger. "Open the ledger to page 4. We are going to discuss your offshore embezzlement. Connor stares at the heavy leather-bound ledger like it is a live explosive device. His hand hovers over the cover, trembling slightly, as the polished facade he walked in with begins to fracture. He knows exactly what is waiting for him on page 4. He knows because he is the one who meticulously buried those numbers under a maze of shell companies' fake consulting fees and offshore holding accounts. He slowly flips the thick pages. The crisp sound of the paper turning is the only noise in the penthouse boardroom. He reaches page 4 and stops. The blood completely drains from his face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray against the crisp white collar of his custom-tailored suit. He is looking at rows of highlighted transactions detailing millions of dollars siphoned directly from his investors to fund his personal lifestyle. He is looking at federal prison time neatly printed in 12-point font. Chantel looks at her husband, her eyes wide with frantic confusion. She does not understand balance sheets or corporate tax law, but she understands the look of absolute defeat radiating from him. Connor cannot even speak to defend himself. He just stares at the ledger, paralyzed by the reality that his fraudulent kingdom has been completely exposed by a woman he once openly mocked at a Thanksgiving dinner table. When a spoiled child is backed into a corner, they do not fight. They call for backup. Chantel's manicured hands dive into her designer purse, her breathing shallow and rapid. She pulls out her phone. It is a staggering display of unprofessionalism and childish desperation. We are sitting in a multi-million-dollar corporate negotiation room, assessing a $15 million debt crisis. And she is literally calling her mother to bail her out. It is the exact same tactic she used 10 years ago when I refused to cancel my birthday dinner. She runs to Vivian to fight her battles because she has never had to face a single consequence in her entire life. She slams her phone onto the black marble table and hits the speaker button. The dial tone echoes sharply off the glass walls. I do not stop her. I simply lean back in my leather chair and wait. I want to hear this. I want Connor to witness exactly how useless his wife's family is when confronted with actual unyielding power. Vivian picks up on the second ring. Chantel, what is wrong, honey? Vivian says, her voice thick with immediate protective concern. That tone makes my stomach tighten for a fraction of a second before my emotional armor completely seals it off. For 33 years, I have never once heard my mother use that soft, worried tone for me. It has always been reserved exclusively for her golden child. Mom, Chantel says, her voice cracking into a theatrical, panicked sob. It is Kendra. She is the one holding our debt. She is the secret investor. She is trying to ruin us, Mom. She is demanding all these ridiculous things and cornering Connor with fake documents. You have to tell her to stop right now. There is a brief pause on the other end of the line. A 10-year silence between a mother and daughter is suddenly bridging across a cellular network right in the middle of my boardroom. Vivian does not say my name with shock or affection. She does not ask where I have been for the last decade or how I am doing. She does not express a single ounce of joy at finding out her estranged daughter is a highly successful executive sitting in a Chicago penthouse. She goes straight to her default programming. She goes straight to protecting Chantel at my expense. Kendra. Vivian barks, her voice tinny but commanding through the phone speaker. I do not know what kind of game you are playing up there, but you need to stop this nonsense immediately. Your sister has been under an immense amount of stress lately, trying to keep her family together. Whatever papers your brother-in-law needs you to sign, you sign them right now. Stop being difficult and tearing down your sister. Do not embarrass this family by acting bitter over old grudges. You have always been so selfish, Kendra. Fix this for them today. I look at the phone sitting on the cold marble. I look at Chantel, who is sitting up a little straighter now, her chin raised, slightly emboldened by the familiar shield of our mother's favoritism. She actually thinks a scolding from Vivian holds weight in my boardroom. She truly believes the toxic dynamic from our childhood home applies to my corporate empire. Connor is looking at the phone too, a brief flicker of pathetic hope crossing his face as he waits for me to submit to maternal authority, just like I used to when I was younger. I lean forward, resting my forearms heavily on the table. I bring my face close to the phone. Hello, Vivian. I say, my voice perfectly level, stripping away any title of familial respect. I am not playing a game, and I am certainly not signing away $15 million to save a man who steals from his own company. Your golden child is broke, Vivian. Her husband is a massive fraud. They do not own a country club membership, they own a mountain of toxic debt and illegal liabilities. And you have absolutely zero authority in my building. I reach out and tap the red button on the screen, ending the call instantly. The silence rushes back into the room, heavier and more suffocating than before. Chantel stares at her disconnected phone, her mouth hanging open in pure shock. The safety net she has relied on her entire life just evaporated with a single touch of my finger. I turn my attention completely away from her, treating her like the irrelevant background noise she truly is. I focus entirely on Connor. He is sweating profusely now. Actual beads of perspiration are forming on his forehead and rolling down the side of his face. He knows Vivian cannot save him from the Securities and Exchange Commission. He knows Chantel's tears cannot pay back his furious investors. His white male corporate privilege has completely run out of runway. He is used to failing upward and being protected by a system designed to shield men like him, but he has just hit a concrete wall named Kendra. I tap the open ledger on page 4. You have two options, Mr. Sterling, I tell him, laying out his destruction with absolute calm. Option 1 is you refuse to cooperate. You walk out of those oak doors and take the elevator down to the lobby. If you choose that option, my legal team will immediately forward this exact ledger and all supporting offshore bank records to federal prosecutors. They will freeze your corporate accounts, they will seize your personal assets, and you will face a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary for corporate embezzlement and wire fraud. Chantel will lose the mansion, the luxury cars, and every single piece of designer clothing you bought with stolen investor money. Connor swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing against his tight collar. What is option 2? He whispers, his voice entirely devoid of the manufactured bravado he walked in with just 20 minutes ago. Option 2 is total surrender, I state coldly, holding his gaze without blinking. You have exactly 48 hours to draft a complete transfer of equity. I want 80% of your company. I want total controlling interest of all subsidiaries and logistics contracts. I want your formal resignation as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately upon signing. You will walk away with a minority 20% stake that carries 0 voting rights and 0 executive authority. You will become a silent, powerless minority shareholder in a company you used to run into the ground. In exchange, I will assume the massive debt you created, and I will not hand page 4 over to the federal authorities. Connor looks physically ill. He is staring at the end of his career, the end of his pride, and the abrupt, violent termination of his unearned privilege. He opens his mouth to negotiate. I can see his brain scrambling to find a middle ground, to beg for 50% equity, to ask for a phased transition where he can save face with his country club friends. I cut him off before he can even form the words. There are no negotiations, Mr. Sterling. I say, my voice ringing with finality. There are no extensions, and there are no compromises. You have 48 hours to surrender your company to me, or I will gladly watch you go to prison. I highly suggest you spend those hours securing a very good corporate lawyer. Jamal will show you to the elevator now. Less than 24 hours pass before the desperation in Atlanta metastasizes into full-blown panic. I step through the revolving glass doors of my corporate headquarters just after 1 in the afternoon. I am returning from a highly successful lunch acquisition, and the cold Chicago wind is still clinging to my tailored wool coat. The lobby of my building is a cathedral of modern commerce. It is a sprawling expanse of polished white marble and brushed steel. Executives and analysts move through the space in a synchronized hum of high-stakes finance. It is my territory. It is my ecosystem. It is Kendra. The voice cuts through the ambient noise of the lobby like a heavy, blunt instrument. I do not flinch, but my footsteps instantly halt. I know that commanding baritone. It is the exact same voice that told me to stop being a spoiled child 10 years ago. It is the voice that demanded I cancel my 23rd birthday to serve a man who is currently facing federal prison. I turned slowly. Standing near the sleek reception desk, flanked by imposing security turnstiles, are Vivian and Reginald. They look entirely out of place in this pristine corporate fortress, but they carry themselves with the same manufactured arrogance they always weaponized in our suburban Atlanta home. Vivian is clutching a designer handbag that Connor likely purchased with stolen investor funds. Her face is pinched into a tight mask of maternal disappointment. Reginald stands tall, his chest puffed out, projecting the authoritative aura he used to dominate every room he entered. They flew hundreds of miles on zero notice because their golden child called them crying. They came to Chicago to put the rebellious scapegoat back in her place. I do not walk toward them. I wait for them to approach me. Reginald marches across the marble floor, closing the distance with heavy, aggressive strides. Vivian trails closely behind him, throwing pointed glances at the passing analysts and vice presidents. She wants an audience. She wants the people in this building to see a mother scolding an unruly daughter. She thinks public embarrassment is still a valid currency against me. What exactly do you think you are doing? Reginald demands, his voice booming, echoing off the high ceilings. He does not offer a greeting. He does not acknowledge the decade of silence. He attempts to establish immediate, absolute dominance. Your sister called us in hysterics last night. She said you dragged them up here to ambush them with fake financial documents and illegal threats. I look at my father. I look at the graying hair at his temples and the deep lines around his mouth. He is trying to project absolute power, but all I see is a man blindly defending a fraudulent empire. I am conducting business. Reginald, I say, keeping my voice dangerously level. You are currently trespassing in my corporate headquarters. You have exactly 30 seconds to state your purpose before I have you removed. Vivian gasps dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. She looks around, ensuring the receptionist and two passing junior partners witness her maternal outrage. How dare you speak to your father that way, she hisses. We flew all the way here because you are actively trying to destroy your sister's marriage. You have always been jealous of Chantel, but attempting to bankrupt her husband out of sheer spite is a new low even for you. I remain perfectly still. I do not cross my arms. I do not raise my voice. I am completely impervious to the guilt trip she is trying to orchestrate. Reginald steps closer, invading my personal space, attempting to use his physical presence to intimidate me. He lowers his voice to a harsh, reprimanding growl. You are going to cancel whatever ridiculous extortion scheme you have cooked up against Connor. Do you have any idea what you are doing to this family? We have worked our entire lives to build an image of Black excellence. We built a legacy so Chantel could marry well and secure our position in the right social circles. Now you are using your little firm to attack a successful white businessman and tear down your own blood. You are making us look like fools, Kendra. You are destroying Black excellence just to settle a petty childhood grudge. The sheer delusion of his statement is staggering. He is standing in a multi-million-dollar corporate lobby entirely owned and operated by his Black daughter, and he is accusing me of destroying Black excellence because I am holding a white corporate embezzler accountable for his crimes. He is so desperate for proximity to Connor's white generational wealth that he cannot even see the actual empire standing right in front of him. I look at Reginald and Vivian. I see the exact same people who scrubbed baseboards while Chantel drank wine. They have not changed. They still believe I am the 23-year-old girl who will shrink away and apologize if they yell loudly enough in public. They think if they make enough of a scene in my lobby, I will submit to their authority just to avoid the embarrassment. Tyson, the head of my building security detail, spots the confrontation. He is a massive, imposing man who takes his job incredibly seriously. He approaches us with swift, purposeful strides, his hand resting casually near his communication radio. Ms. Williams Tyson says, his deep voice cutting through Reginald's escalating tirade. Is there a problem here? Do these individuals need to be escorted off the premises? Reginald's jaw drops. His eyes dart from Tyson to me. He is genuinely shocked that another black man in a position of authority is addressing me with absolute deference. Vivian shrinks back slightly, her grip tightening on her designer bag. The reality that I am not just an employee in this building, but the apex predator who controls it is finally starting to penetrate their thick armor of denial. I look at my parents. I see the panic flickering behind their eyes. I could easily nod my head and watch Tyson drag them out through the revolving glass doors. I could let them face the utter humiliation of being physically ejected onto the freezing Chicago streets. But throwing them out of the lobby is too quick. It is too easy. A public ejection would just allow them to return to Atlanta and play the victims. It would allow them to tell their country club friends that I am simply a bitter, heartless daughter. They flew all the way to Chicago to defend a corporate criminal because they think they hold the moral high ground. I need to shatter that ground completely. I need to strip away every single delusion they have left. I hold up my right hand. Tyson immediately stops his advance and stands at attention, waiting for my command. No, Tyson. I say, my voice echoing with icy precision. There is no problem. These are my guests. I turn my gaze back to Reginald and Vivian. The false bravado has drained entirely from their faces, leaving only nervous uncertainty. They realize they have walked into a trap they do not understand. You want to talk about family legacy? Reginald, I say, gesturing smoothly toward the bank of private elevators. You want to talk about Connor's financial success and Chantel's perfect marriage? We can absolutely do that, but we are not going to do it in my lobby. I turn on my heel, my tailored coat sweeping behind me. I do not look back to see if they are following. I know they are. Their desperate need to control the narrative will not allow them to walk away. Follow me to the penthouse, I command over my shoulder. If you want to witness a slaughter, you are going to need a private seat. The heavy oak doors of my penthouse office click shut, sealing us inside. The sound is sharp and final. The advanced soundproofing of the executive suite immediately eliminates the ambient hum of the Chicago traffic far below, leaving the room in a suffocating, deafening silence. Outside those doors, I am the founder of a ruthless corporate empire. Inside this room, Reginald and Vivian still believe they are the wardens of my life. I do not offer them a seat. I do not offer them anything to drink. I walk slowly around the perimeter of my massive glass desk and take my place in the high-backed leather chair. I sit perfectly still, resting my hands on the polished surface, waiting for their performance to begin. Reginald does not disappoint. He completely ignores the sheer scale of the power surrounding him. He refuses to acknowledge the reality of the skyscraper he just ascended. He marches right up to the edge of my desk, planting his hands down, heavily leaning over in a textbook display of physical intimidation. It is the exact same posture he used when I was a teenager to force my compliance. He thinks physical proximity and a booming voice will intimidate me into submission. He believes the dynamic of our old suburban living room still applies here. You are going to stop this foolishness right now. Kendra, Reginald barks, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. I do not care what kind of fancy corporate title you bought for yourself in Chicago. You are still my daughter, and you will not destroy your sister's marriage out of petty jealousy. You will draft a debt forgiveness agreement for Connor today. You will wipe that $15 million slate clean, and you will apologize to Chantel for the distress you have caused her. I do not blink. I look past him to Vivian, who is standing near the doorway clutching her designer handbag like a protective shield. She nods along with his demands, her face arranged in a mask of stern maternal disappointment. They have practiced this routine for decades. When the roaring does not immediately make me cower, Reginald reaches for his ultimate weapon. He stands up straight, adjusting his expensive suit jacket, preparing to deliver what he thinks is a lethal blow. If you do not sign those papers by the end of business today, Reginald snarls, pointing a finger directly at my face, I am cutting you out of the family trust entirely. I will call my lawyers in Atlanta the second I walk out of this building. You will be formally disinherited. You will not see a single dime of the generational wealth I spent my entire life building. You will be dead to this family both socially and financially. I will make sure your name is erased from our legacy. You will have absolutely nothing. A heavy, stifling tension descends upon the room. Reginald stands tall, his chest puffed out, waiting for the devastating impact of his words to strike me. He expects me to panic. He expects the 23-year-old girl who packed her suitcases in the middle of the night to suddenly resurface, terrified of being permanently cut off from the family safety net. He truly believes that his money is the unbreakable leash that can drag me back into line. He assumes the fear of poverty will force me to drop the proxy acquisition and save his precious son-in-law. I look at his pointing finger. I look at the veins bulging in his neck. I look at Vivian, who is watching me with a smug, satisfied expression, certain that my father has just secured their victory. And then I do something that completely shatters the atmosphere. I laugh. It is not a loud, hysterical sound. It is a quiet, dark, and utterly cold chuckle that originates from the very bottom of my chest. It is the sound of absolute, untouchable security. Reginald's face falters, his aggressive posture slipping for a fraction of a second. "Do you think this is a joke?" he demands, his voice cracking slightly under the strain of my unexpected reaction. I stop laughing. I lean forward, mirroring his posture, but replacing his frantic anger with lethal calm. "I think your perception of reality is the joke, Reginald," I say, keeping my voice dangerously level. "You walked into my corporate headquarters, bypassed my security detail, rode my private elevator to my penthouse office, and you are trying to threaten me with a trust fund." I pause, letting my eyes bore directly into his, forcing him to maintain eye contact. "Let us talk about this generational wealth you are so proud of. Let us talk about the leverage you used to keep Chantel compliant her entire life. The family trust you hold over everyone's head is worth what exactly? $4 million. Maybe $5 million on a remarkably good market day." Vivian gasps from the doorway, deeply offended that I would casually quantify and dismiss their entire life's work. I do not look at her. I keep my focus entirely on the man who thought he could buy my obedience. "The quarterly tax bill for my Chicago subsidiary alone is larger than your entire generational trust." I state the words, landing like physical blows against his ego. "My personal liquid assets could buy and sell your entire financial portfolio before my morning coffee gets cold. I secure acquisitions before breakfast that are worth triple what you spent a lifetime accumulating. You are threatening to take away a glass of water from a woman who owns the entire ocean. Your money means absolutely nothing to me." The dynamic in the room violently shifts. The color rapidly drains from Reginald's face. He physically takes a step back from my desk, his hands falling limply to his sides. The weapon he used to control Chantel, the weapon he used to keep Vivian compliant, the weapon he assumed would bring me to my knees, has just shattered against my armor. He looks around the opulent office, not with arrogance anymore, but with a dawning, terrifying realization. He is finally comprehending the sheer scale of the wealth surrounding him. He is realizing that he has absolutely zero financial leverage over me. His money means nothing here. His parental authority means nothing here. "You cannot possibly have that kind of capital," Vivian stammers from the back of the room, her voice trembling as her worldview begins to collapse. "Connor said your firm was just a small proxy. He told us you were just a front for real investors. He said you were bluffing." "Connor is a desperate fraud who steals from his own company to buy your affection," I snap back, shutting her down instantly. "And you were both foolish enough to blindly believe him because he fits your perfect country club aesthetic. You enabled a corporate criminal because you cared more about his pedigree than his competence." Reginald opens his mouth, trying to formulate a response, trying to desperately claw back the dominance that has completely evaporated from the room. He stutters, his previously booming voice reduced to a dry rasp. He is a man who has just discovered his crown is made of paper. I do not give him the opportunity to recover. I do not let him find his footing. I reach into the top drawer of my desk. I pull out a thick, heavy manila folder. The top of the document is marked with bright red, highly classified redaction tape. I place my hand flat on the cover, feeling the weight of the devastating secrets contained inside. I look directly into my father's eyes, stripping away the last ounce of his pride. "You should not be worried about cutting me out of your will, Reginald," I say, my voice dropping to a glacial chill as I slowly slide the heavily redacted manila folder across the polished glass desk toward him. "You should be much more worried about your own assets." Reginald stares at the heavy manila folder on the glass desk. He does not want to touch it. His instincts, honed from decades of climbing the corporate ladder, are screaming at him that whatever is inside that folder is dangerous. But his ego refuses to let him back down in front of me. He reaches out with a rigid hand and flips open the cover. Inside is a stack of financial documents printed on thick, watermarked paper. They are not corporate ledgers from Connor's failing logistics firm. They are residential property records, bank liens, and notarized loan agreements. I watch Reginald read the top page. I watch his eyes scan the bold print at the header. The transition is fascinating. First, there is confusion. His brow furrows as his brain struggles to contextualize the address printed on the document. It is his address, the sprawling brick estate in Atlanta that he spent 30 years paying off, the house that stood as the ultimate monument to his version of success and black excellence. Then the confusion curdles into pure, unadulterated horror. "What is this?" he whispers, his voice entirely stripped of its former booming authority. His hands begin to tremble, causing the thick paper to rustle loudly in the silent office. Vivian senses the immediate shift in the atmosphere. The protective maternal arrogance she carried into my lobby evaporates. She steps away from the door and rushes to Reginald's side, leaning over his shoulder to read the documents. I fold my hands neatly on my desk and deliver the autopsy report. "That is a secondary mortgage on your retirement home, Reginald." I state, my voice echoing with surgical precision. 2 years ago, when Connor first started burning through his venture capital, he hit a massive liquidity wall. He needed immediate cash to hide his failing numbers from the board of directors, but he could not leverage his own mansion because he had already taken out secret loans against it to fund Chantel's luxury lifestyle. He needed pristine, unencumbered collateral. He needed a property owned free and clear by someone with impeccable credit. Vivian lets out a sharp, breathless gasp. She points a manicured finger at the document, her acrylic nail tapping against the loan amount. $2 million, she chokes out the number, tearing through her throat. "You are telling us Connor took out a $2 million loan against our house? This is a mistake. This is an administrative error. Reginald would never authorize this." She looks at her husband desperately, seeking confirmation that their fortress is secure. Reginald is staring at the paperwork as if it has teeth. "I never signed this," Reginald says, his voice rising in panic. "I never sat down with a loan officer. I never put my home up as collateral for Connor's business. This is bank fraud. Connor committed wire fraud and identity theft. I will have him thrown in federal prison tonight." He is clutching the papers so tightly his knuckles are turning white. He thinks the betrayal begins and ends with his white son-in-law. He still believes his carefully curated family unit is intact. He thinks Chantel is just an innocent victim of a deceitful husband. I lean forward, resting my forearms on the glass desk. I am about to dismantle the core foundation of their entire existence. "Turn to page 7, I command." Reginald fumbles with the stack of papers, hurriedly flipping past the amortization schedules and the banking disclosures. He reaches page 7. It is the final authorization page, the signature page. "Look at the signature line on the bottom right corner," I instruct him. Reginald stares at the ink. Vivian leans closer, squinting at the cursive handwriting. It looks like Reginald's signature. It has the same aggressive looping capital R and the same sharp, jagged angle on the final letter. To a lazy loan officer processing a mountain of digital paperwork, it passes basic scrutiny. But to the people who actually live in that house, the forgery is glaringly obvious. Vivian's breath hitches, her eyes widen in sheer terror. She knows that handwriting. Every mother knows the specific slant and curve of her own child's penmanship. Reginald traces the ink with his trembling index finger. He sees it too. He sees the slight hesitation in the loop of the R. He sees the distinct flourish at the end of the name, a flourish he never uses, but one that his golden child spent hours practicing when she was a teenager, trying to forge his signature on high school report cards. "Connor did not forge your name, Dad," I say, my voice dropping to a glacial chill. "Your son-in-law could never replicate your signature well enough to pass a notary check." He needed an accomplice. He needed someone with direct access to your personal financial records, your social security number, and your secure filing cabinets. He needed someone who could walk into your home office on a Sunday afternoon, smile in your face, and steal your identity right out from under you. The silence in the penthouse office is absolute. It is the sound of a dynasty collapsing into dust. Chantel knew exactly what Connor was doing. I continued driving the blade in completely. She knew the business was bankrupt. She knew the luxury cars, the country club memberships, and the designer wardrobes were about to be repossessed. And instead of facing reality, instead of downsizing or getting a job, your golden child chose to sacrifice your security to maintain her illusion of superiority. She forged your signature, Reginald. She handed the deed of your fully paid retirement home over to a desperate man just so she could keep sipping champagne at the country club. Reginald staggers backward. The back of his knees hit the heavy leather guest chair, and he collapses into it. The man who walked into my office threatening to erase my name from his legacy is now sitting slumped over, utterly destroyed by the daughter he sacrificed me to protect. Vivian is physically shaking. Her entire body vibrates with the seismic shock of the betrayal. She shakes her head back and forth desperately, trying to reject the truth staring her right in the face. "No," Vivian whispers, her voice cracking, breaking into a fragmented sob. "No, Chantel would never do this to us. She loves us. We gave her everything. We did everything for her." "You did," I agree, my tone devoid of any sympathy. "You scrubbed her baseboards. You catered her parties. You canceled my 23rd birthday dinner because ensuring Chantel looked good in front of Connor's wealthy white parents was your highest priority. You taught her that her comfort was worth more than my dignity. You taught her that she was entitled to everything. You should not be surprised that she finally decided she was entitled to your house too." Vivian looks down at her hands, the hands that spent decades maintaining a flawless image of success, the hands that prepared countless holiday dinners I was excluded from, the hands that are now shaking violently as they hover over the fraudulent mortgage documents. The realization crashes down on her with brutal, unforgiving force. She gave up her relationship with me. She alienated her youngest daughter. She spent her entire adult life serving the whims of a spoiled, entitled golden child. And her reward for all that absolute loyalty is a $2 million fraudulent lien on the only sanctuary she has left. The papers slip from Vivian's trembling fingers. They scatter across the polished glass desk, sliding over the edge and fluttering down to the cold concrete floor. She does not reach down to pick them up. She just stares at the empty space where the documents used to be, her chest heaving with silent, panicked breaths. The daughter she chose over me has just signed away her entire retirement. The heavy silence in my office shatters the moment the forged mortgage documents hit the floor. The sound of the paper slapping against the concrete is the starting gun for the most pathetic performance I have ever witnessed. Chantel does not apologize. She does not look at Reginald with remorse. She does exactly what a lifetime of zero consequences has trained her to do. She bursts into violent theatrical tears. It is a high-pitched wailing sound that forces her to double over in her chair. She covers her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with manufactured agony. She is deploying the ultimate weapon she used in our childhood home whenever she broke a rule or failed a class. She is playing the absolute victim. "Connor, it is all Connor," she sobs, her voice muffled behind her designer rings. "He told me the business was just experiencing a temporary dip. He told me the venture capitalists were breathing down his neck and threatening to take everything we built. He said we just needed a bridge loan to get through the quarter. He said, if we lost the house, if we lost our country club status, his investors would smell blood in the water and pull their funding." I was terrified. I was just trying to support my husband. I watch Connor sink lower into his leather chair. He does not speak up to defend his wife. He does not take accountability for his own $15 million fraud. He sits in complete cowardly silence, perfectly willing to let his black wife take the heat from her parents while he hides behind her tears. He leveraged her family to save his own skin, and now he is letting her take the fall. Chantel drops her hands from her face. Her makeup is running, but her eyes are suddenly hard and defensive. She spins her chair to face our parents, but she points her finger directly at me. "And where were you?" she screams, her voice echoing sharply off the glass walls. "Where were you when we were drowning Kendra? You are sitting up here in a Chicago penthouse making millions of dollars while your own flesh and blood is suffocating in Atlanta. You ran away. You abandoned your family. 10 years ago, you threw a childish temper tantrum over a birthday dinner, and you walked out on us. If you had been there, if you had answered the phone, if you had brought your income to the table, we would not have been in this mess." The sheer audacity of her logic is staggering. She is sitting in my corporate headquarters surrounded by the wreckage of a massive felony fraud committed by her and her white husband, and she is actively blaming me for not being there to fund it. She is furious that she could not use me as a financial human shield. She believes my entire purpose on this earth was to serve as her personal safety net, and my absence forced her to commit forgery. "If you had not been so bitter and selfish, I would never have had to sign Dad's name," Chantel cries out, leaning toward Reginald. "I did it for the family, Dad. I did it to protect our image. You taught us that Black excellence means never showing weakness. I was just trying to protect what you built." I look at Reginald. The patriarch who walked into my lobby demanding my obedience is completely broken. He cannot even look at his golden child. He is staring blankly at his own hands, processing the reality that his daughter weaponized his life's work to subsidize a deceitful man. But Vivian cannot accept this reality. A mother who has spent 3 decades protecting her favorite child from reality cannot suddenly acknowledge that her daughter is a criminal. Vivian's deeply ingrained conditioning overrides her shock. She rushes across the room and drops to her knees right beside Chantel's chair. She wraps her arms around her weeping daughter, stroking her hair, casting a venomous glare at Connor. Vivian blames the white man for corrupting her perfect child completely, ignoring the fact that Chantel is a grown woman who knowingly forged her own father's signature on a $2 million bank lien. Then Vivian stands up. She turns her gaze away from the daughter who betrayed her and locks her eyes onto the daughter she threw away. Vivian crosses the room. She steps right over the forged deed to her own home lying on the concrete floor. She marches up to my glass desk and reaches across the polished surface. Before I can pull back, she seizes both of my hands. Her grip is tight, sweaty, and reeking of desperate entitlement. She looks at me with wide, pleading eyes, but her tone is not a request. It is a maternal command. "We can fix this," Vivian says, her voice trembling with frantic urgency. "We can keep this quiet. Nobody outside of this room ever has to know what Connor made her do." I stare at the woman gripping my hands. She does not care about the law. She does not care about the massive breach of trust. She only cares about sweeping the scandal under the rug to maintain their pristine social standing in Atlanta. "Kendra, you have money now!" Vivian pleads, her voice rising in pitch. "You just told your father you can buy and sell us. You are rich. You own this entire building. A $2 million mortgage is nothing to you. You can fix this today. Pay off the mortgage, Kendra. Write a check to the bank. Pay off whatever mess Connor made at his company and let us go home. Save your sister's marriage. Save our home. Do this for your family." The air in my office turns absolutely frigid. I look down at my mother's hands clutching mine. She is begging the scapegoat to rescue the golden child. She wants me to liquidate millions of dollars of my hard-earned corporate capital to cover up a felony forgery just so they can go back to their country club and pretend they are vastly superior to me. She wants me to buy her house back from the bank so she can continue to treat me like an unwanted burden. I do not yank my hands away. I do not shout. I move with slow, deliberate precision. I pull my hands backward, sliding them out of her frantic grip, millimeter by millimeter. I let her feel the physical rejection. I watch her fingers close around empty air. I fold my hands neatly on my desk, intertwining my fingers. I look at Vivian. I look at Reginald, who is watching me with a hollow, desperate hope. I look at Chantel and Connor, who have suddenly stopped crying and sweating, hanging on to the possibility that the rich little sister is actually going to bail them out. A laugh starts deep in the bottom of my chest. It rises up my throat and escapes my lips as a dark, hollow, resonant sound. It contains absolutely zero humor. It is a laugh born of pure, unadulterated power. The sound of it bounces off the floor-to-ceiling windows and sends a visible shiver down Vivian's spine. "You want me to pay off the mortgage?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of an executioner's blade. "You want me to write a multi-million-dollar check to the banking institution currently holding the fraudulent note on your retirement home? You want me to settle the debt so you can all walk out of here pretending none of this ever happened?" Vivian nods eagerly, tears of relief springing to her eyes. "Yes, Kendra, please. Just pay the bank and we can put all this ugliness behind us." I lean forward, resting my chin on my folded hands. The predatory smile returns to my face, sharp and unyielding. "You are missing the biggest piece of this puzzle, Vivian," I say, watching the color drain from her face as my tone shifts. "You are assuming the banking institution that issued that secondary mortgage still owns the debt. You are assuming the original lenders held onto a highly suspicious, over-leveraged residential note tied to a man drowning in corporate fraud." Connor sits up straight in his chair, his eyes wide with sudden renewed terror. He knows how the secondary debt market works. He knows exactly what I am about to say before the words even leave my mouth. "Banks do not like toxic assets, Vivian." I continue, keeping my eyes locked on her terrified face. "When Connor started missing the payments on your house, the original lenders flagged the file. They audited his corporate standing. They realized he was a massive liability. They bundled that fraudulent mortgage and they sold the distressed note at a steep discount to a private real estate acquisitions firm just to get the toxic paper off their books." Chantel stops breathing. Reginald grips the armrests of his chair so hard the leather groans. "I did not just buy Connor's corporate debt," I reveal, my voice striking the room like lightning. The scattered papers lie on the cold concrete floor, like the wreckage of a plane crash. Nobody moves to pick them up. Vivian is staring at the forged signature of her husband, the ink mocking her entire existence. The pristine reality she spent 30 years carefully cultivating has just been burned to the ground by the very daughter she idolized. The silence in my penthouse office is absolute. It is a thick, suffocating quiet that forces my family to sit with the crushing weight of their own failures. I do not offer them a moment of comfort. I let the silence stretch and twist until it becomes physically painful for them. I stand up slowly, smoothing the front of my tailored suit. I walk around the edge of my massive glass desk and step directly onto one of the scattered mortgage documents. I do not look down. I keep my eyes locked on Reginald. The patriarch who walked into my building threatening to erase my name from his legacy is now sitting slumped in his chair, utterly paralyzed. "You asked me to pay the bank, Vivian," I say, my voice slicing through the heavy air. "You dropped to your knees and begged me to write a multi-million-dollar check to save your retirement home. You wanted me to bail out your golden child and sweep this felony forgery under the rug so you could go back to Atlanta and pretend your family is perfect." Vivian slowly raises her head. Her eyes are bloodshot and wide with raw terror. She looks at me as if she is seeing a complete stranger. "I did write a check." I tell her, my tone completely devoid of mercy. "I wrote a very large check from my primary holding account. But I did not pay off your debt, Vivian. I bought it." Reginald flinches as if he has been physically struck. His chest heaves as he struggles to draw oxygen into his lungs. He grips the leather armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles are completely white. "What are you talking about?" Reginald rasps, his voice a dry, hollow shadow of its former booming authority. I take a deliberate step forward, closing the distance between us. I want him to hear every single syllable. I want him to understand the exact mechanics of his destruction. When Connor started missing the monthly payments on this illegal secondary mortgage, the original lenders panicked. I explain, mapping out the financial execution with surgical precision. "Banks despise toxic assets, Reginald. They despise risk. When their fraud department flagged the irregularities in your forged signature, they realized they were holding a $2 million residential note tied to a man who was actively driving a tech logistics firm into bankruptcy. They wanted the paper off their books immediately before the Securities and Exchange Commission started asking questions. Chantel lets out a ragged, pathetic sob from her chair. She is curled in on herself, clutching her designer handbag like a child holding a security blanket. She is finally realizing that her actions have consequences, and those consequences are sitting right in front of her. My firm operates a highly aggressive real estate subsidiary. I continue ignoring my sister completely. We specialize in acquiring distressed high-value residential debt. We have proprietary algorithms that constantly scan the banking sector for vulnerable assets. The moment Connor Sterling popped up on a distressed asset registry, my team intercepted the file. We approached the panicked lenders through a blind proxy LLC. We offered to take the toxic paper off their hands for a substantial discount. They gladly signed the contract to escape the liability. Reginald stares at me, his jaw slack, his mind failing to process the magnitude of the trap he is currently sitting in. I do not just hold the keys to your son-in-law's failing company, Dad. I say the word dad tasting like poison on my tongue. I own the note on your house. I own the walls you sleep in. I own the driveway you park your cars on. I legally own the exact same dining room where you told me I was an embarrassment to this family 10 years ago. Vivian covers her mouth with both hands, a muffled cry escaping her lips. She is looking at the daughter she threw away and realizing that I now hold the absolute power to render her homeless. The house in Atlanta was her ultimate status symbol. It was the physical manifestation of her Black excellence. It was the fortress she used to judge everyone else around her. And now the deed to that fortress sits securely in my corporate vault. You are my landlord, Reginald whispers the words scraping out of his throat like crushed glass. I am your sole creditor, I correct him coldly. And unlike the bank, I do not offer grace periods. I do not negotiate payment plans. You owe me $2 million, Reginald. And because your golden child forged your signature on a fraudulent document, I have the legal right to accelerate the loan. If you miss a single payment by a single hour, I will initiate foreclosure proceedings so fast it will make your head spin. I will have the county sheriff evict you from that property, and I will sell your beloved house to the highest bidder. Chantel cannot take it anymore. The reality of her ruined life violently breaks through her delusion. She leaps up from her chair, her perfectly styled hair a messy, chaotic halo around her tear-stained face. You cannot do this, Kendra, she screams, pointing a shaking manicured finger at me. You cannot take Mom and Dad's house. It is their retirement. They worked their entire lives for that estate. You are a monster. You are a bitter, vindictive monster trying to punish us because you were always jealous of my life. I turn my gaze to Chantel. The absolute lack of emotion in my eyes stops her screaming instantly. She physically recoils, shrinking back under the weight of my stare. I did not forge a signature, Chantel. I state, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous frequency. I did not embezzle millions of dollars from investors to buy country club memberships and luxury cars. I did not leverage my parents' security to fund a fraudulent lifestyle. I built an empire from the ground up because you forced me out into the cold. You set your own house on fire, and now you are screaming at me because I bought the ashes. You did this to them. You signed away their retirement. You made them my tenants. Vivian is weeping openly now. The immaculate poised matriarch is completely gone. She is a broken, terrified woman watching her legacy disintegrate. She looks at Chantel not with maternal protection, but with a dawning, horrified realization. The daughter she sacrificed me to protect is the exact same daughter who just destroyed her life. We can fight this, Reginald says, his voice trembling but desperately trying to find a shred of his former authority. We can hire lawyers. We can claim fraud. We can tell the courts Chantel acted without our consent. We can have the mortgage invalidated. You can certainly try, Reginald, I reply, matching his desperation with absolute supreme confidence. You can hire the most expensive defense attorneys in Atlanta. You can drag your daughter into a federal courtroom and testify under oath that she committed felony forgery. You can send Chantel to federal prison for a minimum of 5 years just to save your house. Is that what you want to do? Are you finally willing to hold your golden child accountable? Or are you going to protect her one last time and hand me the keys to your estate? Reginald opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. He looks at Chantel, who is sobbing hysterically, begging him with her eyes not to send her to prison. He looks at Vivian, who is completely incapacitated by panic. He is trapped in a prison of his own making. He enabled a monster, and now the monster has consumed him. The power dynamic in the room has completely violently inverted. The wealthy commanding parents who walked into my lobby demanding my obedience have been reduced to powerless, terrified debtors. The arrogant white brother-in-law who tried to talk over me is sitting paralyzed by his own massive failures. The spoiled golden child is facing a prison sentence. I stand victorious in the center of my penthouse office, surveying the absolute devastation I have orchestrated. I do not feel a single ounce of pity. I feel nothing but the pure, unadulterated satisfaction of absolute justice. Suddenly, the sound of a fist slamming violently against the polished glass desk shatters the heavy silence in the room. Connor leaps to his feet. His face is a dark, furious red, the veins in his neck bulging against his expensive silk tie. His white corporate privilege flares up one final desperate time. He refuses to accept that he has been entirely outmaneuvered by a black woman he views as beneath him. He is cornered, trapped, and lashing out like a wounded animal. "This is illegal!" Connor shouts, his voice echoing aggressively off the floor-to-ceiling windows. "This is textbook predatory lending. You cannot orchestrate a proxy acquisition to target family members. This is a massive violation of fiduciary duty. You engaged in tortious interference with our primary lenders. I'm going to sue you for everything you own. I will drag your firm into federal court and expose this entire extortion scheme. I know the laws in this state, and I know you cannot leverage a fraudulent document to force a corporate takeover. You are not taking my company, and you are not taking this house. I will destroy you before I sign a single piece of paper." Connor Sterling stands in my penthouse boardroom, breathing heavily as the echoes of his screaming threats bounce off the cold glass windows. His face is flushed a dark, angry red, and his chest heaves against his custom-tailored shirt. He has just unleashed a barrage of legal jargon threatening me with lawsuits for predatory lending, tortious interference, and breach of fiduciary duty. He truly believes that speaking loudly and throwing around corporate buzzwords will intimidate me into backing down. He expects me to flinch. He expects me to call my own lawyers and scramble for a defense. He is relying on the aggressive entitlement that has shielded him his entire life, assuming that because he is a wealthy white man in a suit, the world will naturally bend to his demands. I do not flinch. I do not break eye contact. I sit perfectly still in my leather chair, letting the silence rush back into the room and swallow his pathetic outburst. I look at him not with fear or concern, but with the detached clinical observation of a predator watching its prey exhaust itself against a steel trap. "You are finished yelling, Connor?" I ask, my voice calm and completely devoid of emotion. He glares at me, his jaw clenched tight, his hand still planted firmly on my desk. He thinks his anger is a weapon. He has no idea it is just a symptom of his profound powerlessness. I do not engage with his empty legal threats. I do not waste my breath explaining that you cannot sue a holding company for predatory practices when you voluntarily signed a commercial debt consolidation agreement to hide your own felony fraud. I do not explain that discovery in any civil lawsuit would immediately expose his cooked books to the public, making him the prime target of a federal investigation before we even reached a courtroom. He knows this. Deep down, beneath the panic and the arrogance, he knows he has absolutely no legal ground to stand on. I reach my hand slowly under the thick edge of my glass desk. I find the small, discreet silver button mounted beneath the surface. I press it once. The heavy oak doors at the back of the boardroom click loudly, unlocking with a sharp mechanical snap. They swing open in perfect unison. Jamal walks back into the room. He is not alone. Flanking him are three of the most ruthless, highly compensated corporate litigators in the city of Chicago. They are led by Attorney Harrison, a brilliant, imposing black woman who commands respect simply by entering a room. She wears a razor-sharp navy suit and carries a single slim leather portfolio. The legal team moves with synchronized, terrifying precision. They do not look at Reginald or Vivian, who are shrinking back into their chairs. They do not look at Chantel, who is staring at them with wide, panicked eyes. They look only at Connor. My family watches in stunned silence as the sheer magnitude of my corporate infrastructure invades the room. Reginald, the man who constantly belittled my intelligence and told me to watch a real businessman operate, is now paralyzed as he witnesses what a real empire actually looks like. He is realizing that while he was busy showing off his suburban manufacturing plant, I was building an army. Attorney Harrison steps up to the black marble table. She does not introduce herself. She does not offer a polite greeting. She opens her leather portfolio and extracts a thick document printed on heavy legal paper. She slides it across the smooth marble surface, stopping it exactly in front of Connor. Connor stares down at the document. His aggressive posture wavers. He does not want to read the bold text at the top of the page, but his eyes are drawn to it against his will. "That is not a civil lawsuit, Mr. Sterling," I state, leaning back in my chair and resting my fingertips together. "That is not a cease and desist letter, and it is not a negotiation tactic. That is a fully drafted, legally binding confession of corporate embezzlement, offshore tax evasion, and wire fraud." Vivian lets out a sharp, muffled gasp, covering her mouth with her trembling hands. Reginald goes completely rigid, his eyes darting between me and the legal document. I keep my focus entirely on Connor, watching the remaining color drain from his face. My team has spent the last 72 hours tracing every single phantom vendor, every shell company, and every fraudulent wire transfer you executed over the past 2 years. I explain, my voice ringing with absolute crushing authority. That document details the exact dates, times, and routing numbers you used to siphon $15 million of investor capital to fund your wife's country club lifestyle. It outlines the specific mechanisms you used to falsify your quarterly earnings reports. It is a comprehensive, undeniable roadmap of your criminal activity. It is everything the federal government needs to secure a conviction without a single day of trial. Connor's hands begin to shake. He reaches out tentatively and touches the edge of the paper as if it might physically burn him. He reads the first paragraph. He sees the exact name of the offshore holding account he thought was completely untraceable. His breathing becomes shallow and erratic. The illusion of his corporate invincibility is entirely shattered. He is not a brilliant executive suffering a cash flow hiccup. He is a thief who has been caught red-handed, and the evidence is sitting right in front of him. I reach into the inside pocket of my slate gray suit jacket. I pull out a heavy silver fountain pen. I hold it for a fraction of a second, feeling the cool metal against my skin. I place the pen on the glass desk and push it slowly across the surface. It glides silently over the glass and stops right next to the confession document. I look directly into Connor's terrified eyes. "I am offering you a choice, Mr. Sterling," I say, delivering the ultimatum with cold, unyielding precision. "You can pick up that pen right now. You can sign the addendum attached to the back of that confession, surrendering the remaining 80% equity of your company to my firm immediately. You will sign a formal letter stepping down as Chief Executive Officer and relinquishing your seat on the board of directors. You will walk out of this building with absolutely zero executive authority, zero voting rights, and zero access to the corporate accounts. You will surrender the keys to your entire empire. In exchange, my legal team will lock that confession in our secure vault, and we will not hand it over to the authorities. You will lose your company, but you will keep your freedom." I pause, letting the weight of the offer settle heavily onto his shoulders. Or I continue, my tone dropping to a dangerous, chilling whisper: "You can refuse. You can walk away from this table. If you choose that route, Attorney Harrison and her team will take that document. Walk out of this building, get into a waiting town car, and drive directly to the United States Attorney's Office. They will hand the evidence to the federal prosecutors before you even make it to the airport. You will be indicted by the end of the week. You will be stripped of your assets, your reputation, and your custom suits. You will spend the next decade in a federal penitentiary, and Chantel will be left completely destitute, facing potential accessory charges for her role in the fraudulent mortgage." The silence in the boardroom is absolute. The trap has completely closed. There is no negotiating. There is no charming his way out. There is no white privilege card left to play. Connor is staring down the barrel of a loaded gun, and he is the one who handed me the bullets. He looks down at the silver pen. His hands are trembling so violently he has to clench them into fists at his sides to hide the shaking. He looks at Chantel, who is staring at him with a mixture of horror and desperate pleading. She wants him to fix it. She expects him to deploy his usual arrogance and make the problem disappear just like he always has. But Connor cannot look her in the eye. He looks at Reginald, the father-in-law who worshipped the ground he walked on. Reginald is staring at him with pure, unadulterated disgust, finally seeing the pathetic, cowardly criminal hiding behind the expensive suit. Connor is broken. The realization crashes down on him with devastating force. He is going to lose his company. He is going to lose his status, his power, and his entire identity. He has been completely decimated by the black sister-in-law he thought was nothing but a rebellious failure. He reaches out with a shaking hand and picks up the silver pen. No! The scream tears through the heavy silence of the boardroom, violently shattering the atmosphere. Chantel leaps up from her leather chair, pushing it back so forcefully it nearly tips over. Her face is contorted into a mask of pure, feral rage. The pristine, poised society wife image has completely evaporated, leaving behind a desperate, vicious woman, watching her entire kingdom crumble into dust. She cannot handle the reality of her husband's defeat. She cannot process the fact that she is losing her wealth, her status, and her parents' home in a single afternoon. Her brain rejects the truth, and she reverts to the only defense mechanism she has ever known. She attacks the scapegoat. "You are not doing this!" Chantel screams, her voice shrill and echoing wildly off the glass walls. She points a trembling finger directly at my face, her chest heaving with furious, panicked breaths. "You are not taking our company. You are not taking my life." I do not react. I simply watch her unravel. "You are a bitter, jealous monster!" Chantel shrieks, tears of pure rage streaming down her face, ruining her flawless makeup. "You have always been jealous of me, Kendra. You have always hated that Mom and Dad loved me more. You hated that I got the perfect husband and the perfect life while you were struggling in some tiny apartment. You have spent 10 years plotting this out of pure spite. You are doing this because you are broken and miserable and you cannot stand to see me happy." Vivian stands up, reaching out frantically to pull Chantel back to grab her arm and quiet her down. Chantel shoves our mother's hand away, violently refusing to be silenced. "You think buying our debt makes you better than us?" Chantel yells, leaning over the marble table, her eyes blazing with irrational fury. "You think stealing my husband's company and threatening my parents' house makes you powerful? You are nothing but a vindictive dropout who ran away because you could not handle the fact that you would never be as good as me. You are destroying your own family just to prove a point. You are ruining our lives out of pure malicious jealousy." Her screams reverberate through the penthouse suite, raw and unhinged. She is desperate to assign blame, desperate to paint me as the villain, so she does not have to face her own complicity in her destruction. She wants me to be the jealous little sister. She needs me to be the monster, so she can remain the victim. I look at Chantel standing there screaming her lungs out, her face red and distorted, her entire world collapsing around her ankles. I look at Connor holding the silver pen, utterly defeated, preparing to sign away his empire. I look at Reginald and Vivian, who are watching their golden child self-destruct in real time, realizing that they sacrificed their relationship with me to build a shrine to a fraud. I do not interrupt her screaming. I sit in my leather chair, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, and completely untouchable as I prepare to deliver the final killing blow. Chantel stands there, gasping for air. Her chest heaves violently as the echoes of her frantic screaming die against the soundproof glass walls of my office. She expects me to yell back. She expects a dramatic, sisterly screaming match like the ones we used to have in our childhood bedrooms. She is desperately craving an emotional reaction from me to validate her victimhood. I do not give her one. I place my hands flat on the smooth black marble of the conference table, and I slowly stand up. The movement is so deliberate and so devoid of any aggressive energy that the entire room collectively holds its breath. I look at my sister. I look at the ruined makeup streaking down her cheeks and the panicked trembling of her hands. Jealous, I ask, my voice perfectly calm, cutting through the lingering tension like a blade. You think I am destroying you because I am jealous of your life. I take a slow step away from my chair, moving deliberately down the length of the table. Let us examine this perfect life of yours, Chantel. You are married to a man who steals from his own investors to buy your affection. You spend your days parading around a country club built on toxic debt. You wear designer clothes funded by offshore wire fraud. Your entire existence is a hollow, fragile performance subsidized by a criminal. I am not jealous of you, Chantel. I pity you. You are a grown woman who still calls her mother to fix her mistakes. But your mother cannot fix a federal indictment, and she cannot buy back the house you stole from her. Chantel shrinks back into her leather chair, unable to maintain eye contact. The fiery rage that fueled her outburst extinguishes instantly, leaving nothing but cold terror. I turn my attention to Vivian and Reginald. They are sitting rigidly, watching the daughter they discarded systematically dismantle the daughter they worshipped. 10 years ago, you left me standing in a tiny apartment on my 23rd birthday, I say, addressing my parents with chilling clarity. You told me to cancel my dinner. You told me I was the strong one. You used my resilience as a convenient excuse to abandon your responsibilities to me. You rushed off to scrub floors for Connor's family because you were so incredibly desperate for proximity to his white generational wealth. You thought securing his pedigree was the ultimate achievement for this family. You thought you were securing your legacy. I gesture toward Connor, who is still staring at the silver pen and the drafted confession on the table. Look at your legacy, Reginald. Your legacy is a coward sitting at my table deciding whether he wants to surrender his stolen company or spend the next 10 years in a federal penitentiary. You sold out your own flesh and blood to cater to a parasite. Reginald closes his eyes tightly, a look of profound physical pain washing over his aging features. He cannot defend himself because every single word I am saying is an undeniable fact. You called me bitter. I continue pacing slowly behind the row of leather chairs. You think I spent the last 10 years plotting revenge. You flatter yourselves. I did not spend a single second of the last decade thinking about you. I was too busy surviving the reality you threw me into. Leaving me that night was the greatest gift you ever gave me. It was the absolute most defining moment of my entire life. I walk over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the sprawling Chicago skyline. When you abandoned me, you stripped away every single delusion I had left. You taught me the most valuable lesson of my corporate career. You taught me that blood is just a biological accident. It guarantees absolutely nothing. Loyalty is not a birthright. Loyalty is a currency, and you bankrupted yours 10 years ago. I turn back to face them. I built this empire because I had to. I had no safety net to catch me. When I fell, I hit solid concrete. I worked 100-hour weeks. I slept on office floors. I learned how to read corporate ledgers until my eyes bled because I knew that if I failed, nobody was coming to save me. I had to become a fortress because you left me completely exposed. I walk back toward the marble table, stopping directly across from Vivian. And look at what your safety net did for Chantel. Look at the monster your unconditional enabling created. She never hit the ground because you constantly threw your own bodies under her feet. You shielded her from every consequence. You paid off her credit cards. You made excuses for her failures. You taught her that the rules do not apply to her as long as she looks good doing it. You nurtured her entitlement until it grew so massive it consumed your entire retirement. She destroyed you because you never taught her how to survive without feeding on someone else. Vivian covers her face with her hands, weeping silently. The immaculate poised matriarch has completely vanished. The devastating truth of her failed parenting is crushing her in real time. She enabled a fraud and alienated a powerhouse. You walked into my lobby today talking about black excellence, Reginald. I say, my voice dropping to a resonant, heavy tone. You accused me of destroying our family image. Real excellence is not a country club membership funded by embezzlement. Real excellence is not begging for validation from a white son-in-law who secretly holds you in contempt. Real excellence is building an impenetrable empire with your own two hands. Real excellence is holding the deed to the room you are standing in. I am the physical manifestation of the excellence you pretended to have. I walk back to the head of the table and stand over Connor. He is sweating through his expensive suit, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Pick up the pen, Connor, I command." The instruction cracks like a whip in the silent room. Connor flinches. He looks up at me, his eyes wide and pleading. He looks at Attorney Harrison, who stands nearby like a stone statue waiting to take the confession to the federal prosecutors. He realizes that there is no hidden trapdoor. There is no last-minute rescue. The black woman he sneered at has completely checkmated him. With a trembling hand, Connor reaches out and wraps his fingers around the heavy silver fountain pen. He pulls the addendum toward him. He does not look at Chantel. He does not look at Reginald or Vivian. He looks only at the signature line that will officially strip him of his entire company and his entire identity. The scratch of the pen against the thick legal paper is the loudest sound in the penthouse. It takes him exactly 14 seconds to sign away the 80% equity, the voting rights, and his role as chief executive officer. He drops the pen. It clatters loudly against the marble. Attorney Harrison steps forward immediately. She briskly collects the signed documents, sliding them securely into her leather portfolio. The transfer of power is complete. Connor Sterling is no longer a CEO. He is a powerless minority shareholder, entirely at my mercy. Reginald watches the transaction with hollow, defeated eyes. The domineering patriarch who tried to control my life with a $5 million trust fund has been reduced to a spectator in a multi-billion-dollar execution. The aggressive posturing is entirely gone. His shoulders are slumped, his posture caved in under the weight of his profound, monumental failure. He bet his entire life savings, his home, and his legacy on the wrong daughter. He looks at Chantel, who is staring blankly at the marble table, processing the reality that she is officially broke. He looks at Connor, the fraud who stole his identity. Then he slowly lifts his head and looks at me. The daughter he threw away. The daughter who now owns his world. His voice is quiet, fragile, and completely broken when he finally speaks. "What are you going to do with our house, Kendra?" I look down at the man who used his financial status as a weapon against me my entire life. Reginald is staring up at me, completely stripped of his pride, his ego, and his authority. He is waiting for me to deliver the final verdict on the sprawling Atlanta estate he spent 30 years paying off. He expects me to evict them today. He expects me to be as needlessly cruel as he was when he told me failures do not belong in his family. I rest my hands on the edge of the black marble table. I do not raise my voice. I speak with the cold, pragmatic authority of a landlord addressing her most unreliable tenants. "You can stay in the house," I tell him. A sharp gasp of relief escapes Vivian. Her shoulders drop and she closes her eyes, whispering a desperate prayer of thanks. She thinks the nightmare is over. She thinks the blood tie has finally saved her. She is entirely wrong. "But you do not own that property anymore, Reginald." I continue, my voice slicing through Vivian's premature relief like a scalpel. "You will sign a standard residential lease agreement before you leave Chicago today. You will pay me rent at the current market value on the first day of every single month. Your payments will be wired directly to my real estate subsidiary. There will be absolutely no family discounts. There will be no grace periods, and there will be no exceptions. If your rent is late by a single minute, standard late fees will apply. If you default on your lease, my property managers will initiate eviction proceedings immediately, and the county sheriff will physically remove you from the premises." Reginald's jaw slackens. The color that had briefly returned to his face drains away entirely. He is a proud man who built his entire identity around being the king of his castle. Now he is nothing but a renter living at the absolute mercy of the daughter he threw away. He will have to write a check to my company every 30 days for the rest of his life just to keep a roof over his head. Vivian opens her mouth to protest, to beg for a concession, but I cut her off with a single freezing glare. "You should be grateful, Vivian," I say sharply. "I am allowing you to keep your country club address, so you do not have to explain to your wealthy friends why you suddenly moved into a budget apartment. You get to keep your precious image of excellence, but you will pay me for the privilege of maintaining it." I turn my attention back to the other end of the table. Connor is finishing the last of the signatures. His hand is trembling so violently he can barely hold the silver fountain pen. He signs his name on the final addendum, legally transferring 80% of his corporate equity and completely surrendering his position as chief executive officer. He drops the pen. It clatters loudly against the marble. Attorney Harrison steps forward immediately. She does not offer him a polite smile or a handshake. She briskly collects the signed contracts, checking each page with ruthless precision. She slides the document securely into her leather portfolio and snaps it shut. The sound echoes through the boardroom with absolute finality. The transfer of power is officially complete. Connor Sterling is no longer a powerful corporate executive. He is a disgraced, powerless minority shareholder stripped of his authority, his voting rights, and his access to the company accounts. His white male privilege has been completely neutralized by legally binding contracts. He slumps back in his chair, staring blankly at the polished table, a man completely decimated by his own arrogance. Chantel looks at her husband. The golden child, who spent her entire life demanding perfection, is finally realizing the absolute wreckage of her reality. She looks at Connor not with love or support, but with pure, unadulterated disgust. The man she chose, because he offered her a shortcut to immense wealth, has just dragged her into total financial ruin. I look directly at my older sister, letting her see the profound pity in my eyes. "You won, Chantel," I tell her, my voice calm and perfectly steady. "You got exactly what you wanted 10 years ago. You got the wealthy husband and the perfect wedding. You got mom and dad to scrub your baseboards and cancel my life just to serve your ambition. And look at what it bought you. You are shackled to a broke, disgraced man who stole from his own company to buy your affection. The luxury cars will be repossessed by the end of the week. The country club memberships will be canceled due to non-payment. You are going to have to get a real job, Chantel, because Connor's minority dividends will barely cover his mounting legal fees. You are entirely stripped of the lifestyle you felt so wildly entitled to." Chantel opens her mouth, but a dry, choked sob is the only sound that comes out. The flawless superior facade has melted away entirely, leaving a terrified woman staring down the barrel of a life she has no idea how to survive. I do not offer her a tissue. I do not offer her a single word of comfort. The transaction is complete. My business here is done. I press the communication button on my desk. "Tyson," I say, my voice projecting clearly through the intercom. "Please come to the penthouse boardroom. We have 4 unauthorized visitors who need to be escorted off the premises immediately." The heavy oak doors swing open seconds later. Tyson enters, flanked by 3 massive security guards. They move with quiet, intimidating efficiency, forming a perimeter around the conference table. "It is time for you to leave," I announce, turning my back on my family and looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Chicago skyline. I hear the scraping of chairs. I hear Vivian crying softly, her sobs muffled against her designer coat. I hear Reginald dragging his feet across the polished concrete, moving with the slow, heavy steps of a man who has lost everything that mattered to him. I hear Connor attempting to gather his expensive leather briefcase, his hands shaking so badly he drops it twice. They are being physically marched out of my corporate fortress. They are being escorted to the freight elevator so they do not contaminate the main executive lobby. I do not turn around. I do not watch them walk out the door. I do not shed a single tear. There is no heartwarming hug. There is no forced forgiveness or cinematic reconciliation. The toxic cycle that bound me to these people has been permanently and violently severed. The heavy oak doors click shut. The room falls into a beautiful, pristine silence. I am completely alone, and I am entirely free. The scene shifts. The heavy, aggressive atmosphere of the boardroom fades away, replaced by the warm, ambient glow of a stunning, upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago. It is 8 o'clock in the evening. The dining room is a masterpiece of modern elegance, featuring dark mahogany accents, soft jazz music, and massive glass windows that offer a breathtaking, unobstructed view of the glittering city skyline. I am not sitting in a tiny, cramped apartment eating cold takeout. I am not waiting for a phone call from parents who view me as an inconvenience. I am sitting at the head of a long, beautifully arranged private table. I am wearing a breathtaking crimson silk dress that catches the dim light perfectly. I look powerful, radiant, and completely at peace. Tonight is my 33rd birthday. I look around the table. I am surrounded by my chosen family. Jamal sits to my right, laughing brightly as he recounts a story to the rest of the table. Attorney Harrison sits across from him, her sharp legal demeanor replaced by a warm, relaxed smile. My closest friends, the people who stood by me when I was sleeping on office floors and fighting for every single contract, are seated all around me. These are the people who earned their seats at my table through loyalty, respect, and unconditional support. They are the family I built with my own two hands. A waiter dressed in an impeccable tuxedo approaches the table. He carries a silver bucket resting on a crisp white cloth. Inside is a wildly expensive bottle of vintage champagne, the exact kind of luxury my parents spent their entire lives pretending they could afford. The waiter expertly pops the cork, the celebratory sound cutting through the lively conversation of my friends. He pours the golden bubbling liquid into tall crystal flutes, setting one precisely in front of every person at the table. Jamal picks up his glass and taps it gently with his fork. The table quiets down, turning their smiling faces toward me. To Kendra, Jamal says, his voice filled with genuine, profound respect, "To the most brilliant, ruthless, and fiercely loyal woman in this entire city. You built an empire out of nothing, and you brought all of us along for the ride. Happy birthday, boss." A chorus of cheers and genuine applause erupts around the table. My friends raise their glasses, their eyes shining with real affection and pride. I pick up my crystal flute, feeling the cool glass against my fingers. I look at the people surrounding me. I look at the incredible life I constructed from the ashes of a deeply painful betrayal. Leaving that suburban house 10 years ago was terrifying. It required me to walk away from everything I knew and face a brutal, unforgiving world completely alone. But it was the absolute best decision I ever made. It taught me that my value is not determined by the people who abandoned me. My value is determined by my own relentless, unbreakable will. I turn my chair slightly, looking out the massive windows at the glowing Chicago skyline stretching endlessly into the night. I raise my glass to the city that watched me bleed, sweat, and conquer. I am finally celebrating the birthday I was denied a decade ago. I am fully victorious. I am entirely independent, and I am completely untouchable. The greatest lesson we can learn from this journey is that true power does not come from seeking validation from those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Blood simply makes you related, but loyalty, respect, and mutual support are what actually make you family. When toxic relatives try to diminish your light to maintain their own illusions of superiority, your ultimate revenge is not a screaming match. It is building your own impenetrable empire of financial and emotional independence. You must learn to walk away. Have you cut toxic ties? Share your story below, like this video, and please subscribe.